Okay, the next thing we're going to do, like I said, is we're going to join the two sides. And when we do this, it's right sides to right sides for sewing. Like so. I'm going to line everything up, pin it all. So you remember that seam in the middle? You want to make sure that guy's lined up. Pin it. Same thing here. Do you remember our cutout match-up marks here? You want to match those guys up. Pin it. And then, same thing for here. On the front and inside here is line everything up, and then remember you got these match-up marks here. Make sure those are lined up. So I'll get this all pinned together, and we'll come back from there. And like I said, as you can see, it's right sides to right side, and we're going to sew everything here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. There is parts of this vest or waistcoat that we're not going to sew, and that is the sides. So we're going to sew everything. We're going to stop here basically a 1/2 inch from this seam. We're not going to sew this side. Same thing over here. We're going to come over here and we're going to stop a 1/2 inch from this side. We're not going to sew that. We're going to sew the bottom, but we're going to stop a 1/2 inch over, sew the bottom. Same thing for the sides. We're going to sew everything 1/2 inch seam allowance, and when we come to the sides here, we're not going to sew those guys. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 sides we're not going to sew, and I'll show you that here later. So let's get this sewn up. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start sewing this vest here. And like I said, for the sides you don't sew and there's a 1/2 inch seam allowance, what I like to do is take a ruler here, and what I'll do is I'll actually mark the sides, because I'm not going to be sewing this side, so I'm going to put a mark here, knowing that I'm going to stay a 1/2 inch off this side that I'm not sewing now for the seam allowance, and that works pretty good. So let's get started. So as you can see, everything is sewn, everything on the vest except for the sides. And do you remember when I put this guy in here, I kept it back roughly 3/4 of an inch, and that's so that when you fold that over, it's not going to be part of that seam or whatever. So one of the things we do want to do, which will help when we turn this right side in, is where you see the armpit hole here, is we're going to put little slices along that. We're going to do a little bit right here along the neck, same thing on the other side. And that'll help when you turn it right side in, to because there's a crease on that. And of course, when you do this, obviously you don't want to cut your sew line there, or what you've sewn. So I would say keep it back maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. Pretty basic though, and that'll help when you. Okay, we are ready to turn it the right side out here. And with that, it doesn't matter. You can just go in through a side here, like so. Go all the way down this shoulder here. And because it's for a child, it's pretty narrow in there, so. So what I normally use is just a small dowel, and I'm gonna push these corners out so they're nice before I iron it. I've heard of people using chopsticks, but I tend to like the dowel better because it's a little bit longer. So I will push these corners out like so, and then what we're gonna do from that point is take it to the ironing board, get it pressed, and when we do it, we're gonna get all the corners nice and all the seams good and everything. And then from that point, we'll start working on the sides to get those sewn up. So bear with me. We'll get her looking good and go from there. Okay, now that we have this vest sewn, as you can remember, we didn't sew the sides, neither side. So right after we sewn it, you can see how much better it looks just from being ironed there. All the edges and that, and the pockets look good. Even though they're fake pockets, they still stand out. So the next process is we are going to sew the sides. So if I can remember right, I think what we do here is we're going to take these two sides, and it probably doesn't matter which side you start, but once we can figure this out, we're going to take these two sides out like so, and then with it inside out on the one side is we're going to line these up. And remember our cutout marks here, we're going to line those up and sew these. So I'll get this all in order, I'll get it pinned, and we'll come back and I'll show you what that looks like, and we'll get that sewn. Okay, so I have this pinned, and I just wanted to show everybody kind of the important part of doing this is I started with each seam, and what I did first is I lined each seam up, and then pin those, because I think that's important to get the seams lined up. And then from there I went to these little notches or match out points there, match those up. Remember, you got one on each side and then pinned around. So what we're going to do is we'll sew this 1/2 inch seam allowance, which should be right to there, and we'll just make sure that when we start or finish, or when we go past this, that we're hitting that right there, so those seams are good. So let's get this going. I know when I started at least doing the vests, obviously I'd have to look at videos to how to do some of these features and everything else, and some of the times that I found that on certain parts of the vest, or when they're sewing or doing this or that they didn't spend much time on it, so I'd have to go back, stop it, rewind, and see exactly how they did that, or they didn't. Okay, now that we have this like so, it's all sewn. If you can see, everything's good there. We got those seams matched up, or at least they intersected and hit each other. So now we'll just turn it back, and that should be good and sewn on that side. So this side is done. Get it the right way here. So you can see how that works doing it like that. So as you had seen, what we did is we matched these together, and we brought these two pieces on the inside of the vest, right? So it came out this side, and then we worked everything out outside here and sewn. And I'll show you what we'll do on this. And on this side is, this should be ironed. You can either wait till you're done ironing both. I'm probably just going to iron it right now. That way it'll look good, and I'll iron that and be right back, and we can get this other side. Okay, I went ahead and ironed this side, so that side's literally done. So our next side here, the last one to have this thing together, is somewhat tricky, but it's not too bad. You just gotta, I guess, not necessarily pay attention, but there's a process. So what we're gonna do is, when you do this, obviously you can see I have my little matchup marks are lined up. And what I will do, because what we're going to do is we're going to start, you want to start sewing on the inside. So in other words, not the outside here, but on the inside. And so what we're going to do as we're sewing, we're going to be literally stuffing the vest inside out. So, and then so because of that, you do need to leave an opening, and that's why you want to start on the inside. So what I like to do is I'm going to put a mark, say, right here on the inside, so I will know where to stop. So that's where I'm going to stop as I come around, and this is where I'm going to start, right here. So the bigger the vest, or the bigger the material, obviously the bigger your area here that you don't sew needs to be, because you got to keep in mind that not only are you pushing it in, which is a lot easier when it's not sewn, but when you're done, because it's good, when you're all done with this side, it's going to be inside out. So literally all this is going to be sewn all the way around, and you're going to have this left for an opening. So literally you have to have a big enough area that you're going to reach in there and pull that right side out. So, and if you get it wrong, that's what they make these guys for. So anyway, so let's get started. We'll get that, and we'll see if I get it right the first time. So, but it's not too bad. I think it's mind over matter, or just seeing how you do it. So basically, and I've already pulled these together, even though I don't have this whole thing pinned. I match up my marks, and I've pulled this thing tight, and notice that both the seams, when I pull it tighter, are lined up here, which is the important part. So, but anyway, so we're going to start. Like I said, I got these 2 marks, and this is on the inside of the material. As you can see, that's outside, right, of the back, and this is outside of the front. So here's the inside together, and I have my mark where when I come around, I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to start here, maybe even further down, and I'm going to start sewing. And as we're sewing, I'm going to be literally stuffing that vest so it's inside out. That's how you have to do it. So let's get started on that, and we'll see if we can't get it. So I'm literally right here, and I'm just pushing this down the outside, if you would. And when you sew, make sure that it's not up here, because otherwise you're going to be sewing it. You don't want to sew that. You have to push this down so that you're only sewing the inside, and you got to be aware of that the whole way around. So why don't we get going? So that's down. And I'm probably going to just pull this pin out, because I know I want to start at least there, if not further down, to get that. So I know if I start at least there, I'm okay. I don't want to go up any further. I want to be down this way when I start. So let's see on that guy. Back, even though it's right there, I'm going to come down maybe another 1/2 inch or inch or so, just to give me some more wiggle room, if you would. And then, of course, just make So now we're just going to reach in there and pull everything out. See, it's not super tight, but pulling this out, but I don't know if I'd want it any smaller, because otherwise it just, it makes it hard. And just take your time pulling, because you don't want to pull too hard or start tearing stitches out. So it should come out here. Not too bad here. There we go. Almost got it. So this is the one side that we finished, the first side. Okay, as you can see, this is the side we just did, right? So, see, everything looks like it's lined up, so I think it's all lined up. Everything looks good. So to the inside, and that's why you start and stop on the inside, is because what we're going to do now, as you can see, remember that opening we had? It was right here, is we're just going to take our matching thread and we'll sew that guy. Get that closed up. And that's not that bad. So we'll get that closed up, sew it, and then so we're going to get that guy closed up. Like I said, we'll get it sewn, we'll get it all ironed, and then the last process obviously is we're going to put buttons on it. So stay with me and we'll be right back. Get that going. Okay, we're going to stitch up the inside of this thing, the part that we left open. As you can see, it's not going to be very hard, or it's pretty basic here. I got matching thread, and we're just going to stitch that guy closed. And again, it's on the inside, so there may be other ways to do it, but this is the way that I learned, and it seems to work. So sometimes what I'll do, because you can't really see where to start and stop, is where it's sewn, is I'll put a pin up there, and that way I can see, and I'll even put one back here so I know where to start and stop, just to make sure that I have it, because when it's underneath the presser foot there, sometimes it's hard to see. You just want to make sure you get it all sewn up, if you would. And like I said, I usually go, I don't know, maybe an eighth or so past the stitching here to make sure that it's all closed up. A lot of times with these small threads here that are exposed, it's nice to burn the ends there. It just makes it cleaner and looks a little bit better. So that is that. So that's the inside. So as you can see, and you're really not going to see that. So like I said, there may be other ways that you could do that, but that's how I learned. So that part is done. It's all together. I think it's looking pretty good. And like I said, I'll get that ironed. And the next and last thing we have to do is put some buttons on that. So we'll go from there. Okay, and I think where we left off here is, we got most of the vest done here, and I think we're ready for buttonholes. So I'll go through that and see if we can't get those started. So normally what I like to do is, for buttonholes, is to go ahead and take a piece of scrap material, try your buttonhole setting, everything you have first on a piece of scrap material, to make sure that all your settings and everything you have is right. I don't know how many people have did buttons holes. They're not that bad. You have some settings on your sewing machine. Also, what you'll have, if you're able to do buttonholes on your sewing machine, is what they call a button foot. And on this guy, I believe they're 3/4 of an inch. It'll accommodate most size buttons, so you can see it lengthens and shortens. So what you do is, whatever button you want to put on there, you put that guy in there, you tighten it up, make sure it's somewhat sturdy in there. You attach your button foot like so, and then you have your settings on your sewing machine that enables you to do buttonholes. So So like I said, I take scrap material, I do a sample first to make sure all the settings are right, so I have everything in order. And with that, let's get one going here. So there is your buttonhole right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. And we're just going to make sure it fits for that size button. Everything on that looks pretty good. So I think we're good. Everything looks good. The button fits. So I think we're good with that setting and that. So there is something I wanted to point out too, is when you're measuring these or trying to figure out where your buttons go on this guy, is I do them so that the middle of them are approximately ½ an inch off of here. So, and you can gauge that, you can do them however you like. But obviously when you put your buttonholes on, they need to be even. So, as you can see, I'm only going to put 3 buttons on this guy. So if you want, you can sometimes what I'll do is I'll lay the buttons out like so, just to see what looks good and where they should go and how many buttons you should do. And then that'll give me an idea or a reference. And then from there, I'll go ahead and mark them out. And like I said before, for boys or men, the buttonholes are on the left, and for girls or women, they're on the right. So basically what it is if you look at this, how I have it marked and how this button maker works there is I start everything at the bottom of the button, because when you're sewing this thing, you're starting with this presser foot, the button foot, at the bottom, and it sews up. So if you keep that in mind, at least on this machine, I'm sure they're all that way. If you keep in mind those measurements based on that, if you figure all your measurements for your buttons so they're even, starts at the bottom, I think you'll be good. And so then oftentimes too is what I'll do if I have a bigger vest or more buttons, if you would, then what you can always do is you can get your top buttonholes established, and your bottom you don't have to do in the middle. And then once you go back, get those sewn in, once you get those sewn in, then you can lay out however many buttons you want in the middle, and then you can take your measurements off of the top and bottom. That's how I do it. That works easiest for me. And so let's get started. I'm going to start with the bottom, and I'm just going to work my way up, and that way I don't disturb these other pins that I have in there. So, and what these represent is this one going this way represents the bottom, and this is for the side there. So let's get started on that. So let's get that top one sewn there. And part of it, which you can probably see, is just taking your measurements and making sure everything's accurate. And that way, hopefully you only have to do it once and it all turns out. So you just want to take your time with it and make sure all your measurements are good and you're starting off. So you just get everything lined up. The other thing I'll mention is when you on these buttonholes, you can see I had to set my setting obviously on the buttonhole, but then to the width, because what it's going to do is going to go back and forth. So what I like to do is if I'm starting out fresh on a buttonhole, you probably can't see it, but right now this needle is over to the right. So what I'm going to do to get it lined up, so when I first start, I'm going to move it so it's right. It's going to come back over to the left. So it's right in the middle, and that's how I like to start, because that way it'll line up everything good. Everything's in the middle, and then my measurements will be right on. So if you can remember to do that, the small things really help to make it look better and more accurate. And okay, so the top one's done. So we got the bottom, the top, and I'll come back and measure that, but I'm just going to do it off camera. And I don't know if you saw when I was doing this one, it kind of didn't want to move up, but I was able to help it or whatever. That one turned out fine. So I'm going to go off camera. When I come back, I'll have that one all measured, set up, and we'll get the middle one sewn. Okay, I have that middle and last buttonhole all measured. I have it marked on there and all set up and ready to be sewn. So we can't forget this guy. I don't know if you can see it, for the button thing, so that when it goes down, it hits this and it pushes it forward. That way it knows to come back. So let's get this last buttonhole done here. So there's the buttonholes. Everything looks good. And like I said, I did them centered a 1/2 inch from the side here, so they're all lined up, and I believe they're all even. And like I said, when you're laying these out, you want to measure the bottom. Let's see, the bottom to the bottom to the bottom, because it's all going in that way, and that'll help you get your layout so it's all even. Yeah, so that looks good. So basically the last thing we have to do is, obviously we'll cut these through with scissors, so except the buttons, and then we'll sew the buttons on, just 3 of them. And what I like to do is I'll lay the vest out like so it looks all nice and everything's like so. And I'll take it, make sure it's all even. So lay it out is how I do it, so it's all adjusted, so everything is right in order here. And then just come across, and then once I'm happy with where that's spaced, if you would, or set up to sew those buttonholes on, then what I'll do is I'll take a pin in each one of these, and I've already cut these buttonholes out, and what I'll do is I'll take a pin once I have it all set up, and I'll take it and I'll poke that guy right in the middle there, so I know where I want to sew that button. And then I'll take this very carefully and I'll pull that pin all the way out. Now you can see I have my pin down here, and then what I'll do is there's my reference point for the very center of that button. And that's how I'll do it. I'll do it all the way up. And that way I, make sure that I'm sewing those buttons on exactly where they're supposed to be. So that's how I do it. That's what works for me. There may be another way, but that's how I more or less learned. So when we come back, I'm just going to sew those buttons on off camera. We'll come back and we'll look at the whole thing. Okay, and I think the last thing I talked about I had to do was put the buttons on. I got the buttons on. I mean, that's pretty basic, pretty easy. So as you can see, the vest is done. It's finished. And I don't know if I mentioned, but it's for my grandson. He's about 1.5 years old. So that is all done, finished. And then originally, I think everybody had seen the pattern that I had used here, which was for the front and obviously for the back. And I did want to show everybody, here was the original pattern that I took when I originally made another vest for him earlier. And this is smaller, this pattern. So literally what I did was I had used this to create a bigger one for the front and back. So if anybody has any questions or anything, please let me know. And if you're, I don't know what level you are at sewing, if you have any questions or doubts, this is not hard. As you see, I basically kind of walked you through it the best way I could. And this is just a small vest. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. And like I said, if you're having doubts, this is something that you can do. Just take your time, go through the steps, doing it. It's pretty basic, pretty easy. I do not claim to be an expert. I know the basics, and I've been sewing for a while. So if anybody has questions, let me know. Thank you.